You're listening to Halfway There, episode number 171, Dave Ebert and a Funny Way to Overcome Depression. My friends, welcome to Halfway There. This, of course, is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. I am your host, Eric Nevins. Thank you so much for choosing to join us. Perhaps you are on your way somewhere and you noticed there was a new episode of Halfway There that you could take with you to entertain yourself, whether you're on an airplane or in the car, and you chose to download and listen. Thank you so much for doing that. And if that's you, I am glad that you've done so. If perhaps by chance a family member, you were at a gathering, or a coworker mentioned to you Halfway There and you downloaded it and you're listening, also thank you to you for being here. I hope you enjoy it. Our episode today is a fascinating one. I liken it to a seesaw a little bit. We go back and forth one way or the other, because our guest is a comedian and he's funny. And so we laugh and we cry and we talk about things. And then we talk about how comedians often struggle with depression. And so I called this episode A Funny Way of Overcoming Depression, because I think that's exactly what happens here. But I want you to know that that if that's you, there's hope for you. If the holidays bring on depression, I know for many of you, the holidays are a joyful time. This year, normally they are for me. This year, I've been wrestling with some things. We've had some stuff happen, like a school shooting and a divorce in our family, and just things that are kind of weighing on me, financially, trying to figure out how to make this online business thing work. And so I'm approaching this season in need of some encouragement, like we're going to get from this episode. And if that's you, I hope that this episode encourages you as well. And if you're having a wonderful, beautiful holiday season and your life is a Norman Rockwell painting, great. Enjoy all of that as well. So friends, here's what I want to say. First of all, Merry Christmas. And second of all, our guest he's founded the Well-Versed Christian Comedy Group. He travels around. He's going to tell us about his Christian comedy festival that he puts on, which is pretty cool. And he's going to walk us through his story of learning to trust God and find his niche through pro wrestling. Yeah, it's a fun episode. Our guest is Dave Ebert. Guys, here's my conversation with him. Enjoy. Dave, welcome to Halfway There.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. And your episode of my podcast when you came on is one of the most highest rated ones.
I love to hear that.
we cracked double digits, so that was impressive.
Okay, yeah. Now I just feel sad, but that's good. I'm glad to hear.
Well, I do want to let you know that your percentage of the royalties will be sent out. I hope that you'll be able to cash the check.
Fantastic. Great. Okay. Well, good. We're starting off with some comedy. I like that. This will be a fun one. At least I think. I don't know. You could be serious. So, Dave, thanks for being here, man. Tell us a little bit. I gave just kind of that brief overview because I think it's always better to hear from the person who's passionate about what they're doing. Tell us what you're doing and just give us that brief overview.
All right. My wife and I founded Gifts for Glory Ministries, which is the umbrella over our improv ministry, which is Well-Versed Comedy.
Gotcha.
And Well-Versed Comedy is an improv troupe of Christians from a variety of denominations. None of us go to church together. We all met through various connections, like Craigslist, some acting, casting sites, word of mouth, things like that. And so God, it was a God thing to put us all together because otherwise we never would have met. There is no other way. So we've got a group of 5. I'm the only guy on the team, which is a very unique dynamic in comedy. There's 5 of us that do improv. My wife and I perform together every once in a while. We go by the name of Matrimony.
Nice.
Basically, a lot of couples, they pay thousands of dollars a year for therapy. We just work it out on stage, and usually it creates a laugh or two.
That's fantastic.
And then the other thing under the umbrella of Gifts for Glory is Pure Fest, which is a Christian improv and sketch festival, which is coming up September 28th. And I'm not sure when this will air, so that may have already happened, but PureFest is definitely going to have a third year. So keep your eyes out for that.
Very cool. That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm working pretty far ahead, so it very well may have already come and gone, but that's okay. If that's something that you're interested in, you can definitely travel there. And you do that. You're in the Chicago area, so you put that on in Chicago, right?
Correct. It's in the Chicago suburbs, about 30 miles south and west of the city. So most people would identify it as Chicago, even though it's not. Chicago is obviously the biggest thing on the map next to it. So we're in the suburbs, where it's cheaper to rent and safer to travel.
Yeah.
And we're in our second year in 2019, and we've already got that 2020 vision, which is a pun that you're going to hear a lot of for the next probably 18 months.
You're right. The 2020 vision. Oh, I had not thought of that, but you're right. You know what I was thinking about? This is just such a random, weird thing, but do you remember, because you're old enough, like when we were kids, you would say things like 1985, right? 1992, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then it turned over to the new millennium, and we're like, oh, it's 2000, 2001, 2002. We're still saying it 2019, right? We don't say 2019. We say 2019, most of us, right? But I think
definitely, I do think that most people will say 2000. And every once in a while you'll say 2019, but it seems that the vernacular of the world is more like 2000.
Right.
I think there's something about the impressive sound of 2000.
Maybe.
20.
But I think 2020 is when we go back, and it'll be 2020, 2021, 2022.
I think so.
It's just, I don't know why my brain works this way. It's just a thing that I think about. So there you go. Random strangeness from Eric. All right. So I love that you're doing this. You're doing comedy. You're making the world a better place in that way. You have a podcast. We mentioned that. But let's go back and go into your story and hear some more about kind of where, what brought you to this place. So I don't remember. Did you grow up in Illinois there?
We lived here until I was 7, and then my dad had gotten sick. He was a Vietnam veteran, and in his couple years in country, got exposed to Agent Orange. And that, as we've seen, it's really caused a lot of ravages on the vets. Healthy people, in their 20s, by the time they're mid-30s, they're going on disability. They're dying of what's normally a preventable disease. My dad ended up dying at 62 years old from a combination of diabetes, what they thought was multiple sclerosis, and just all these different things. He had 3 heart attacks between 1982 and 1985.
Wow.
And his health was starting to decline in the mid-80s. And so the doctor said, you've got to get out of Chicago, go to a slower lifestyle. And so we moved to Virginia, which is actually, I'd highly recommend, if you ever need to get away and you've got only 6 months to live, move to rural parts of West Virginia or Virginia, because every day feels like an eternity. Okay, that's a joke I stole. I can't take credit.
The rural life. Well, yeah, what's interesting about that is my father-in-law, same deal. Exposed Agent Orange in Vietnam, and then died. I think he was only 60, but had heart issues and diabetes. And so that's not, it's more common than you think. Definitely. He was on disability, and my mother-in-law received some of that benefit. And you know what? Even as a conservative, I think we need to do that, because it was just horrible, some of the stuff that we did to people. So that's not really here or there, but I can relate to that is what I'm trying to say the long way.
Sure. And one of the things that they are finding out is, for anybody that may be a descendant of a Vietnam vet, is they're starting to see that some of the DNA was changed also. So some of this stuff is being passed. So it's important for, if you are the son or daughter of a Vietnam vet, keep tabs on your health and keep going to your regular doctor visits, so that you can prevent long-term damage from the things that were passed on.
Yeah, absolutely.
PSA.
I know my wife wrestles with that as well. She worries about it sometimes. And interesting. It's just that's a weird thing to have to worry about. Kind of strange in a strange war. But okay. But I want to talk more about you. So
Sure.
let's talk about, so you moved to Virginia and you found that every day was an eternity. You were bored. Okay. So what was happening there? What was the spiritual climate like in your family?
We were professing Christians, but not practicing. Kind of like, we had the gym membership, but we never went to work out.
Yeah, that's me. Okay.
And I don't mean that to talk bad about my parents. It's just, the way they were raised, the way they were passing on to me. So when we moved to the South, we did go to church semi-regularly. But it was a Methodist church. It was a very old church as far as congregation. Children were meant to come and sit and be quiet, not to really be invested or discipled. And so we had a couple pastors that invested, but it seemed like because they were investing so much in the youth, some of the old fuddy-duddies were like, no, you need to invest in us. So we need to get another pastor in here. So anybody that would invest in the youth seemingly disappeared within a year or went to another church. So there really wasn't a lot of investment in discipleship as far as faith goes. And I literally believed growing up that no one knew if they were saved. They was just kind of a, hey, surprise, you're going this way or that way when you die. And I also believe that if you lived good enough, you had a good shot. I didn't know anything about what it truly meant to be obedient and be a disciple. Like, well, at least I don't kill anybody. As long as I don't kill somebody, I have a really good shot of getting into heaven. And that was just kind of where I was at spiritually. And it would have saved me so much grief if I'd been in an environment that was discipling, because part of my story, and a huge part of my story, is I battled depression most of my life. I kind of mentally flirted with that level of being in depression from middle school up to early high school, and then my sophomore year in high school, I just really dove headfirst into a full-on deep, dark depression where suicide became a real option. I never attempted, and I always cursed myself for never attempting, thinking that it was because I assumed it was because I was afraid of doing it. But looking back, it was more of that still small voice, even though I'd never really had that discipling. In sixth grade, I did say the little sinner's prayer on my way back from a worship service at a church camp. So I believe I was saved from that point, but I definitely walked away for a long time. But God was still there through the depression, keeping me from taking that final step.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's scary, but it sounds like you, even though you had kind of thought of yourself as being maybe cowardly, but rather it was God's providence taking care of you and keeping you from crossing that line. It's funny how he does that, because he often does that with people. We attribute it to something else. But yeah, obviously it wouldn't have been good if you had done that. And so then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But so God preserved you. What, okay. So were you aware of him being there at all, or how did that start to, change? Not necessarily depression. I know that may or may not have gone on, but, how did your awareness of him start to change?
It really never changed, for a long time through high school, then through college, then after college. The depression was always there. It was always a constant battle. And I was always just emotionally, spiritually, physically just fatigued because of the battle. And all through that time, I used humor for two big reasons. Number one, I felt like I couldn't let anybody know how I was really feeling. I was afraid of being made fun of. I was afraid of the rejection. And the few times when, like in college, and I don't endorse this at all, but in college, I drank a few and I opened up to a couple friends in that liquid courage state. And they're like, come on, Dave, you don't need to be depressed. You got all this. Everybody loves you. And it was like, they were like rebuking me for having the willingness to open up, like, hey, this is where I'm at. And so I shut down there. After college, I went to a doctor and who's referred me to a therapist. And in our 45-minute session, I opened up and said, this is what I'm feeling. And then he asked me some questions about what good was in my life. And after that, he goes, you've got all this good stuff in your life. You really shouldn't be depressed. And I was like, that's why I'm here asking you for help.
Right. So, why do you think I'm here?
Yes. Like, oh, hey, you work out. You shouldn't be sick. Well, that's why I'm at the ER.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. Can we talk about this for just a minute? Because I think the idea of some of the funniest people in the world are the most depressed. Mm-hmm. Right. And we don't have any idea because they're funny, because they're fun. It's good to be around them. And that's just one of the actual warning signs. I mean, this came up when Robin Williams killed himself, right? Because that dude was like, he was insanely funny all the time. I don't know what he was like in his personal life, but every time I saw him, he was just nuts, off the wall, and brilliant, just brilliant. Right. But he was actually really depressed, and probably was for a lot of his life. That's disturbing. So how, as a comedian or somebody who's gone through that, what do people need to know about that experience?
Well, first thing I would suggest is when you have somebody that's that outgoing and that engaging, like Robin Williams, or not to toot my own horn, but myself, is take time to get to know them. Actually make sure that they know that you're there for them. Because I use humor as a way to shield, to protect how I felt. And also, much like Robin Williams and a lot of these others, I also use humor as a way to make sure no one else fell into the same pit I was in. Because if I can get you to laugh, there was that hope there that maybe your life isn't so bad, which at the same time was like a drug to justify my existence. So my biggest thing is just have a relationship and really talk to people. I think that we're too afraid to get our hands dirty and find out the truth. Mm-hmm. Because what if I talk to my funny friend and they really are suffering? What do I do? What door have I just opened? But especially for those that are Christians that are listening to your podcast, I would encourage you just to pray about somebody. If you see somebody that has those same kind of symptoms where they're constantly trying to entertain, constantly being the life of the party, pray and ask God to reveal a truth to you. Say, are they really that good of a position, or do they need somebody to come alongside them and cut through the weeds and get to that hole? Because there are people who are genuinely just funny and outgoing that don't have a battle going on inside. Right. But that's where you need the revelation from God through the Holy Spirit. That's where you need to be in relationship and not take for granted, oh, he's fine or she's fine. She's really funny. I think that one of the key signs is looking for self-deprecating humor. It can be presented in a beautiful and light way where it's like, oh, he's so funny. He was joking about how big he was, because we are on radio, so people may not realize I'm 6'2", a couple biscuits shy of 400. So, self-deprecating humor is a way to also distract, because if I'm joking about it, that would also take the power away of that from somebody that may want to use it against me. So self-deprecating humor is probably a good sign that somebody may need some prayer and somebody to step in to come alongside. And I know I'm not giving a lot of specifics because every depression is going to be different. Yeah. Every person handles what they're going through in a different way. So these are some signs. If there's self-deprecating humor, if there's somebody that's constantly trying to entertain, take a moment to pray about it and see. And then also, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Even if you are listening to this podcast and you're not a believer, you just think this is an interesting topic, I would encourage you to come alongside somebody who's that outgoing and just say, hey, are you really okay? And if they say yes, wait a week. Ask them again. Say, hey, are you really okay? Is there something you need to talk about? And sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 times to prove to them that you're willing to care about them and not just doing something out of guilt or some sort of compulsion.
Yeah, and you may need to build a relationship. There's all kinds of things that may happen there. Sure. But just being aware, I think, is a really huge public service announcement. I don't know what else to say, but it's just a huge wake up call, right? Just a light bulb that, hey, this happens, and it's just not as clear cut as it seems on the surface. And so I think as believers as well, we should have eyes to see. That was one thing that Jesus always did, right? He could see behind the question. He could see the question or two behind the question,
right?
Or comment. And you see him do this with the woman at the well. You see him do this with the Pharisees all the time. Even with like people that he healed. A guy who he heals at the pool, where he's like, "Hey, do you want to be well?" He's getting it. So this guy's like real motivation in there. And I think as believers, that's something God calls us to at least practice, just wonder and care more about the person. So we don't have to say a lot more about that, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's the experience of many, many comedians and people who are just naturally funny, enough that we should talk about it. So there we go.
Right. And I do want to add one real quick thing is it's starting to get better, but I think the church has fallen behind the curve on appreciating the weight of mental illness and of depression, because it's not something that you see. It's not something you treat with chemotherapy or surgery. It's something that seems internal, and a lot of people want to say, well, if you just pray hard enough, or if you get the sin out of your life, maybe it'll be better. No, it's as much a disease as cancer, and it takes prayer, it takes support, and it takes willingness to not give in that temptation of condemning or finding fault.
Yeah.
Because it's just like with the blind man, when the disciples were like, whose sin made this man blind? Was it his or his parents?
Right.
And Jesus said, no, his blindness is not a punishment, but it's an opportunity for God to get glory. So when somebody's healed from depression and freed from the lies of the enemy, which is what depression ends up being at the very root, is a bunch of lies of the enemy. When that delivery happens, it's something that can give God glory. So we as a church need to continue to strive to do better, because we have pastors that are committing suicide.
I know.
We have people in the church that are committing suicide. And it's getting better, but we still have a lot of work to do, because those mental challenges are just as threatening as cancer or a broken leg or other ailments that we can see.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I think this is particularly true for pastors, they feel like they cannot be known and still be accepted in their roles. And that's a serious problem. If nobody knows you, then it's just easy to hide, and you can stumble into things like suicide. So okay, thank you. That was great. I appreciate you just kind of opening up about that and helping, because I know that it happens. So okay, I don't even know where we left off. Were you in Virginia, or no? You were in college. You went to college,
right? I was still living in Virginia. Went to college in Kentucky.
Okay,
at a small school, and there I would use humor again as a way to give myself value. If I was able to make people laugh at lunch and at dinner in the dorms, if I was able to do stupid things to get a laugh and to make life feel better for everybody, then I felt that I had value, that I had a purpose to be there. But if I would go and I'd do something that embarrassed people, or maybe I said a joke that crossed the line and hurt somebody, then suddenly I had no value whatsoever. And that pattern continued through college. And after I graduated college, I transferred back home to school in Virginia. And after college, the depression was still there, still raging. I got into pro wrestling. And pro wrestling became that outlet where I could be creative. And if I could get the crowd either to boo me or to cheer me, I'd done my job.
All right. How did you get into pro wrestling? Because nobody just stumbles into well, maybe they do, but nobody very, very few people go, you know what I want to be today? I want to be Hulk Hogan. So how did that happen?
All right. So when I transferred back home to school in Virginia, Bluefield College, a couple of guys were in the dorm watching a video of them backyard wrestling. They had, a ring built out of plywood and 4x4s. With some remnant carpet padding and then a tarp over it. Well built, but obviously cheaply homemade, not the kind of ring you see in WWE. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Maybe I should try it. Because I've been watching wrestling for years, and as a huge Goldberg fan and huge Hulk Hogan guy, and they're like, yeah, because again, I'm 6'2", 6'3", whatever, and at that point, I was over 500 pounds in college.
So you're their Andre the Giant,
right?
Yes,
exactly. And because of the fact that it was built homemade with 2x4s and plywood, they didn't want me to do a lot of falling, or as they use in the business, they call it taking a bump, because the ring wasn't really equipped. I broke a few pieces of plywood because, in the course of a match, you're going to fall. So, but that's how I started to get into it. And I was also doing part-time work in radio as a DJ. My radio name and then my later wrestling name was Big Boy Buddy Love. And so I'm doing the backyard wrestling, and then I'm also doing radio. And then all of a sudden, this wrestling promotion comes to town. It's a local touring group in Virginia, West Virginia. And they're like, hey, why don't we buy some ads from you guys, and you send one of your DJs down to be a part of the show. And everybody's like, nah, it was kind of beneath them. And I was like, I'll do it. I raised my hand. I jumped at it. So I go and I'm a manager for the guy that's putting on the show. And he's wrestling against Disco Inferno, or he's wrestling against Rick Steiner with Disco Inferno, both from WCW, as his manager. And so my whole thing was I was supposed to be this enforcer, protect him from the attack. And so I went out there, did my thing, and they said, you're not really trained, so don't actually touch the wrestlers because liabilities and whatever. So we go out, it's a good time, and they set it up where they, Disco Inferno and Rick Steiner still jumped this promoter during the intermission period where I wasn't around. So 3 months later, the story is the promoter is mad at me and because I wasn't there to protect him. So we have a match. So my first pro wrestling match was a hardcore Falls Count Anywhere match with zero actual training.
Wow.
And at one point, he hit me with a watermelon. He jumped off the radio station van, which was parked inside the armory. But I still got the win. We worked our way back to the ring, and being 6'2", 500 pounds, I hit him with the big Mark Henry splash, and it was a 1-2-3.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I did right the wrong, though. I did go and I started training at Jimmy Valiant's camp. Jimmy Valiant's a WWE, NWA, WCW Hall of Famer, and he's got a camp in rural Virginia. And so I went there and trained for a couple years and learned a lot about how to wrestle. And I continued to wrestle as this DJ turned wrestler. And spent a lot of weekends on the road. I'd go set up the ring, wait for my 5-minute match, do my match, and then tear down the ring afterwards. And make maybe $30 a night, which would cover most of my gas and my meal at the Waffle House. But yeah, so that's how I got into it. And what a lot of people are impressed about is I tell them that most of my improv training comes from my years in pro wrestling.
Yeah, like what? So give us some of those principles.
All right, so with wrestling and with improv, you go out there, you've got a live crowd, you've got no edits. You can't call cut, say, oh, let's redo that. It's live. You're given a scenario and maybe suggestions of what's supposed to happen, but everything else is just a story told in the ring or on stage. And you go out there, you feed off of your opponent, or in improv, your scene partner. You feed off the crowd, what they're giving you. If they're giving you a lot of energy, you reflect that. If they're not giving you a lot of energy, then you got to try to find a way to draw it out with something fun or something exciting. And then also you get that kind of instinct of knowing, is this the time that I give them what they want, or is this the time that I give them a swerve? It's all about, and it sounds kind of egotistical. It sounds kind of like a God complex, but when you're performing either wrestling or improv, you kind of work to hold the crowd in the palm of your hands. And then you work to either give them the satisfaction of seeing something that they're expecting, or the satisfaction of the swerve that they didn't know that they wanted.
Right.
And And that's all based on feeding off of what they're giving you, what your scene partner is giving you. And other similarities is, let's say I go into a match with a guy that's either in a foul mood or he's just blown up and he doesn't have any energy. So we go out and we end the match sooner so we don't drag it out and make it look bad. In improv, we go into a scene and it's not going so well. We end the scene. We just edit it so that we don't drag it and kill the whole show.
Yeah.
And I know I'm revealing the curtain back, but I think Vince McMahon has done a really good job ahead of me of pulling that curtain back.
Wait, yeah, right. I know. I was just sitting there thinking, wait, do you mean to tell me that pro wrestling is not real? What?
It is real. It's just choreographed.
It's choreographed. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's staged. There's a lot of stuff that they do. It's very interesting. Have you ever seen? I saw Jake the Snake talking about times when he like took the snake and who was the other guy? Randy Macho Man Savage, and he was like, he had to like drain the venom out of the snake so that he could actually sick the snake on Randy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one pay-per-view where Randy's tied up in the rope and then he got the snake to dig into his bicep.
Yeah. I think it was that. Anyway, funny, but very, very interesting. Okay, so that's good. So you're learning a lot of stuff about performing, and I totally respect, by the way, what you said about being able to work a crowd. That talent fascinates me. I think that is so astounding. I mostly have witnessed it in terms of musicians, right? So to see people like, okay, it's no secret, I'm a Bon Jovi fan, right? So I've seen Bon Jovi a couple of times.
Yeah, title of your podcast.
That's right, halfway there. That's where it comes from. Everybody knows Living on a Prayer. So, but here's the good thing is everybody who knows that will never forget the name of my show because they'll be singing it all the way home. Mm-hmm. But but that whole thing, like just watching him, last time he was in town, or they were in town, I went and saw him, and people were starting to sit down like after the third or fourth song, and he was like, "This is a Bon Jovi show, get up!" And he got the whole crowd. Nobody sat down after that, but he just kind of worked the room every way, like he was playing to all the different sides, and it just fascinated me to kind of watch as a bystander to see a professional keep a crowd engaged. It was really cool. So, as a performer, it sounds like you've learned how to do some of that, whether it was wrestling or do it in improv. And like I said, I just really respect that. I think it's an astounding and beautiful skill.
And it's really enjoyable because you know that in most cases you've got people that have paid their hard-earned money to come, and you want to make sure that they have their money's worth. And that's all part of it. You just get that feeling of connecting with them. It's on some levels, it can be kind of a spiritual experience because you're connecting with so many people at once.
Well, what if it is though? What an interesting way to go with that, right? What if it is a spiritual connection? I mean, we're all connected as human beings, but there's also there's more to it, I think, than just the physical, all of that. Okay, so while you're doing all this, tell me what your relationship with the Lord is like and how, so you're starting to do more creativity. It sounds to me like you're discovering some of yourself, perhaps in ways that you didn't have outlets for before. What's that like? Well,
all through that time, I had kind of that distant relationship where I was expecting God to earn my affection. Like, God, you got to fix this. You got to do this for me. You got to give me $1 million so I can get a house and get my life together. Hook me up with the right girl. And it was always like, I was treating God as a genie. And when I rubbed the lamp really hard and nothing came out, I would get mad at God. And God was always, he sacrificed himself so much in my depression because he just absorbed the barbs that was in his way. He's like, I would curse at him like, why can't you just leave me alone? Why do you got to interfere with my life? Why can't you let me be me and let me be happy? And that was all speaking out of depression. And every time something would go mad or go bad, I would blame him. I'd say that he's messing with my life. Every time something I was working toward that fell apart, I would blame him. And again, just blame him for interfering. And so I didn't have a good relationship. I was very much estranged. I was the prodigal son, having left my father and cursing him for not continuing to bail me out. And one night it really reached a climax with my relationship with him. During that depression, I was driving home from an overnight shift. It was still very dark. It was probably 4 a.m, maybe later, but it was still dark. And going through West Virginia to my home in Virginia, a lot of curvy mountain roads. So I'm by myself. I get into this really sharp curve, and the depression's hitting hard. And I say, God, if you're there and you don't want me to do this, do something now. And it's like I felt him grow even more silent. It almost felt like he pulled himself away from me in that moment. And it was a situation where if I just driven straight, people would just assume, oh, he fell asleep, and wouldn't have thought suicide. So it was one of those perfect moments where if I just drove off the road, nobody would know, nobody would be embarrassed. It was just an accident. But in that moment, when I didn't hear from God and I didn't see the sky open and angels come and surround me, I got mad. I got mad at God. But the thing was, I got mad and I went home. It was in that moment where God, working in mysterious ways, he knew what I needed so that I would go home and not drive off the side of that road. And he absorbed the anger and the vitriol I held for him to save my life. And that's just one example. And it was kind of a climax. A few years later is when I really started to warm up to the idea of pursuing him. And that led me to leave the mountains and come back to Chicago.
Well, what did that? What was it that kind of changed your perspective of God?
It was a gradual process. One of my a former pastor of mine called it, I was in the crock pot, where you're just simmering for a long, long time until you're ready to be served. And going from mid 2012 to the end of 2012, there was this war in my mind, and I'm using my hands for your benefit, but not for anybody else, because this is radio.
Yeah.
But on both sides of this mountain, there were two choices. I could either take my life or I could give my life. And as I got to the peak of that mountain, I literally was at that point of one step to the left, I'm going to give my life to the Lord. One step to the right, I'm going to take my life and just end the pain once and for all. And different things kept happening from time to time that would just show me, looking back, that I was not in the right place. Finally, I got to that point where I was really ready, and God sent 2 kids from a Bible college out to my neighborhood. We had a population of maybe 200 people in that neighborhood, and they had no reason to be out there trying to pass out tracts, but they were there that Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. I was late for work, and they handed me a tract, said, "Hey, can we pray for you?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm saved. I'm okay. I'm just really late for work." I blew them off, but I kept the tract. And then that day after work, I got home, and that was when I was like, okay, God is trying to reach me, because there was no reason other than God being there as another tap on the shoulder for those kids to have been there. And so I started reading Rick Warren's book, Purpose Driven Life, which had sit on my shelf for probably 10 years at that point.
Right.
And then I started reading my Dollar General King James Bible, which is all I had.
Yeah.
And then I started to pursue a relationship with him. 6 weeks later, I've left my part-time job in my 300 square foot apartment in West Virginia, and I took residence on my sister's couch up here near Chicago, and just completely started over at the age of 32 years old.
Yeah, which takes a lot of courage right there.
Yeah, it was a God thing. My sister, whether or not she hears this podcast, I think it would be safe to say that she doesn't have an active relationship with the Lord. And so God was still able to use her, because as I was talking and saying, I really don't feel like I belong here in West Virginia. And I did want to ask her and put her on the spot, say, can I move in with you to start over? But God put on her heart, and she offered me the place to stay. And I was like, okay, I'll take it if you're sure. And so I packed everything up in my truck and drove on up to Lombard, Illinois, and crashed on her couch, and just completely started my life over. And this was in March of 2013. And it was about 2 months later that I started what became the Improv ministry, Well-Versed Comedy.
Wow. Okay. So that new beginning was really for you, like a new beginning in every way.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and like a rebirth. It was a new beginning because I came up here, new relationship with the Lord. And it was funny when I started pursuing the Lord in West Virginia, I kept trying to find a right church. But every time I tried to go to a church and try to find a home there in West Virginia, something would happen to keep me from finding a place to set roots.
Hmm.
And I truly believe it's because as much as it would have been beneficial for me to be part of a church, God knew that I needed to move. So why is he going to put me somewhere to set roots if I need to leave? So I didn't set roots in any church in West Virginia. And none of this is against West Virginia where I was. It just, God's plan had me other places.
Yeah.
And I have dear friends and people that I love and miss in West Virginia. It wasn't where God wanted me. And the fact that I'm married now and I've got this improv ministry and other things going on, it pretty well shows that God's plan had me coming back here to Chicagoland.
Yeah. And you begin to find yourself in that. And so I talk about that a lot as part of the spiritual journey. Sounds like you had a long time in the spiritual desert, perhaps.
Right.
But then when you start to come out of that, you're finding yourself, finding out who you are in Christ, what he's made you to do. So how has Well-Versed Comedy done that for you? Maybe that's not the only thing, so you can add other things, but what is that like?
Yeah, it's been a process of redeeming the scars of my choices and the things that went on. Most of my depression and everything else I went through were results of my own choices, but those scars that were left behind, God has been able to redeem because through comedy, through the various things that I'm involved with in my churches, I've been able to use some of the sensitivities and the awarenesses that my experience have brought to reach people. And so he's used me through comedy, through actual ministry from the pulpit. I am pursuing a ministry license to the Assemblies of God here with my church. And so I'm able to share from the pulpit a couple times a year. And so it's just God is redeeming all those pains and all those scars. We call it. I have a show that I've been on Moody Radio, and they refer to it as sacred scars.
Yeah.
And these are things where you don't forget them, but God is able to continue to use them for the betterment of others. And so I've got quite a few of those sacred scars that I've been using through the various things I'm involved in. And comedy, I found, and improv especially, has so many applications outside of just being on stage. It brings people together. If you get a room of 50 people who don't know each other, but suddenly they're laughing at the same thing together, they've suddenly bonded on that spiritual level. They don't feel alone because they've all admitted something about themselves, and they've all found that they have something in common. Even if it's as simple as laughing at the big guy talking like Elmo on stage.
Do you do that? That's awesome.
That tickles. I guess that one was more Bobby's world than it was Elmo, but
that's okay.
And that's one of the things I enjoy about performing is, I am, very large, and I'm also on a cast with myself and 4 ladies, so it's always an interesting juxtaposition for me to play the lower status character, where the temptation or the expectation would be that my characters would be the alpha and being the dominant one, but I actually prefer to play the under character as a supporting character and let the women play the dominant, just because it's interesting to watch and it's not what people expect, which is, again, going back to that wrestling analogy of kind of having that feeling for what the crowd is looking for and giving them something that they didn't know that they wanted.
Yeah. So in this season, what have you learned about God that surprises you?
What have I learned about God that surprises me? I'm still learning that I don't have to earn anything from him. I don't have to earn his favor. I don't have to win his favor. I don't have to be anything but his kid. And that's something that I'll go a week and be like, okay, I'm God's kid. And then the next week it's like, oh, I got to earn God's love. God, I need you to show me favor here. So that's something I'm still learning. And what else have I learned that surprises me about God? Is just how amazing he is at working things together. For the 5 of us to come together as an improv team, that took a lot of moving pieces to come together at the right time. Because one of the ladies had actually been interested in auditioning with us in 2014, but her life did not allow it at that point. And here she is. She joined us 4 years later, and it was just the right time. And it's amazing how he's able to work so many moving parts and on such an individual level. Because in our finite minds, we're like, okay, maybe he has a personal relationship with you on Monday in August, but he's got a billion other people to worry about. So your turn may come again the next year or something.
Right.
But no, he's able to keep all the plates spinning on those sticks without fault.
Yeah, I love that. And so he's definitely there providentially to kind of work all those things together that we need. I love that. Wow. Okay. Well, that's cool. What else do you want to tell us about kind of where you are now? I know you stepped out to do this festival, right? Which I think at this point it will be past, but tell us about like why'd you start that?
Okay. In 2017, I went to a Christian improv comedy conference, which I was surprised to find because I thought, oh, I'm going to corner the market as the only Christian improv group.
Uh-huh.
But then as I further got along into it, and there's a funny side story about that journey, but I found out about this improv comedy conference for Christians. And I went there, and it was in Milwaukee. And the whole weekend I'm thinking like, okay, we've got a conference where there's workshops and there's some together time and there's study, but what about a platform and a showcase for people? Because obviously there's more than me to come together and perform together and offer not only a chance for fellowship, but also a chance to showcase that just because it's Christian doesn't mean that it's B quality or that it's not as good as what the world offers, because Christian improv is probably better and more entertaining because it reaches more people. Families can come in and laugh together, whereas most secular improv, you're going to have the innuendos even on a clean show, so you have to kind of limit who comes. Otherwise, you're risking offense or you're risking, different things. And also, for me, I say we serve the ultimate improviser because we walk on stage and we create a world by speaking. We create our universe with our own rules by speaking things into existence.
Yeah.
And, that's on a very small level compared to what God did. But God came on the scene and he just spoke a universe into existence. So improv is just a great art form. And I'm like, we need to showcase this and give people a chance to fellowship, to build community and perform and have that platform. So that in 2017, I came back and talked to my pastor and I said, I want to do a festival where people come and perform. And he's like, okay. And I said, it's September of 2017. I want to do this next fall. So spent a year planning, preparing, didn't have a budget, didn't know what really I was doing. And so I spent about $250 out of our own pocket to just buy different things, buy food for the event, buy some Facebook ads. But we were able to draw attention in our first year in 2018. We had a team that formed specifically to come to Pure Fest from Denver. 3 people drove the 16 hours or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's a waste.
Stayed in Chicago, and they came and they performed together. We had a team from Milwaukee, and then my team performed, and my wife and I performed as well. And we just really it was just a fun afternoon. And so having 1 year under our belt, going into the 2019 year, I just hit the ground running. I've been working as much as I can to get the word out. And this year we have a team coming from Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee. We have 2 teams coming from Concordia University in Chicago, and then my team, and a one-man show that's coming from Milwaukee, and as well as my team, Well-Versed Comedy, is going to perform. So we've got a full lineup. As we're talking, we have 7 confirmed acts, and by the time everything goes down, we may have more. Apologies to your listeners that I'm speaking in the future tense, but they're listening in what will be the past.
Yeah, there. But that's okay, because you said you're going to do it again next year, and
absolutely,
I love what you're doing. I wish I could get out there for that. That would be super cool. I love this idea of a comedy night, even at your church. I think that'd be really kind of fun.
The whole idea is also the third level is to show the world that it's okay to come to church and expect to have fun. It's okay to come to church and see that it's more than rules and thou shalt nots, that it's a relationship, it's fellowship, it's togetherness. It's because you can't put 13 men together roaming the desert for 3 years without some laughter, without some humor.
Right. And maybe some fart jokes, I'm guessing. Just yeah.
Exactly. I mean, Jesus was like, Peter, pull my finger. And he's like, oh, that wasn't the Holy Ghost. Well, one of my favorite comedians, his name is John Branyan. He has an entire bit about farts. And he says that the sons of Zebedee are also called the sons of thunder.
Right. And we've always assumed that's because they were trying to beat people up, but maybe not.
Right.
I love that. Okay. I will never look at John the same again. Okay. I love it. Wow. All right. Well, so you know what? I think laughter is probably a good place for us to go out. Anything you want to leave us with? I'm just going to, while you're thinking about that. So it's purefest.org, I see. Mm-hmm. If you want to check that out, even if it's in the future, especially if you're in the Chicago area, do that. But definitely for those of you, if you want to travel or you're nearby, you should totally go. Your website is gifts4glory.com, and that's where people can find you and your podcast, of which you've had some very auspicious guests, including me. So you guys should all check that out. And what do you want to leave us with, Dave?
Well, one thing I did want to say, I meant to open with this, was first, thank you for what you're doing with the Christian Podcast Association on Facebook. Doing very similar to what I'm doing is trying to build community with like-minded people. And I know that it can be tiresome work sometimes to monitor and try to build that, but I think you've done a great job. And if there are any Christian podcasters that are listening, join the group, find it on Facebook, because it's really a great community. And I want to congratulate you for creating and manning that up for us.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. That is really kind of you. I found that very similar to you, when I first started podcasting, I thought I was the only one, right? The only one with the vision to start a podcast that's Christian and not preaching. And it turns out that's not true. In fact, there's many other, testimony podcasts like this. But that actually is great because it means that there's a market, right?
Right.
That means other people want it. But beyond that, it was very lonely, and there weren't many groups where we could all get together. And there are other groups that will even teach you how to do some things. And I tried to do that for a while, and I finally decided what's better is if we just connect. I'd rather like somebody else. There's lots of people who teach you how to podcast if you're looking for it, and we can all answer questions. But what's even better is if we just have a community. So when people go in there and go, I'm so tired of this, I can't get any downloads. And I go, great. I know what that's like, and that helps and hopefully advances the mission at the same time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And, just to encourage anybody, especially if you have anybody that's listening, that no matter what day or night this may air, maybe you find it 10 years from now on the archives. If anybody's listening and you're going through what I went through, where you're in that dark place, or you're in that choice of do you give or take your life, I'm here. I promise you that I will be available. I have an email address that I give out. It's Dave@gifts4glory.com. Dave@giftsforglory.com. That email will always be active and will always come to my phone. day, night, AM, PM, middle of the night. If you are in that place and you need somebody to talk to, I seriously am available. I say email because email is a lot easier for me to answer than sometimes a phone call. But I want you to know that email is always going to be available. Dave@gifts4glory.com, and we'll just have a conversation. I'm not going to throw a bunch of scripture at you because that's not how Jesus really did relationship. It's about relationship and me coming alongside beside you as you walk through this, because here's the truth. There's always hope. There is always hope. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Some people's tunnel is longer than others. But I would just want to encourage you, take that next breath, take that next step, live that next hour, live that next day, because it's worth it. And God will use it once you're ready to give it over to him.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Thank you for making yourself available in that way. I love it, guys. I'll have Dave's email in the show notes at halfwaytherepodcast.com as well. Again, gifts4glory.com. And if you want to connect with Dave. Dave, hey, thanks for sharing your story, brother. I really deeply appreciate it. I had a great time, just some laughs, some seriousness, and all the while through just seeing God's thread of providence. It's truly astounding.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for allowing me to share. I love being able to share because my hope and my prayer is that it'll help one person. If all these interviews and everything I do only helps one person, that causes God to celebrate in heaven, which means I've done my duty and I've done what I can for the kingdom.
Amen.